Now back to our top story, the evacuation of civilians by Russian planes from war-torn Yemen. Now RT's Paula Slier, who's been on one of those aircraft, joins us live on the phone just now to discuss the situation. Paula, I hope you can hear me. Now, you've just landed in Cairo, I understand. What can you tell us about your trip?
Well, the entire journey took around 13 hours in total. There were two commercial Russian planes that each carried around 150 people. So some 300 people were evacuated out of Sana today. We left Cairo at around 6 this morning. Now, as you mentioned, I've disembarked with some of the passengers here in Cairo, but most of the passengers are flying right now on their way to Moscow, where they'll arrive later this evening. Yesterday, one of these planes was turned back from Yemen. The other didn't actually leave Cairo, and this was because the airspace over Yemen was closed yesterday. When we arrived at the airport today, it was almost surreal. It was a very organized evacuation. People were waiting in seats. People had come from early in the morning. In fact, some had been waiting since yesterday. But there was a delay. Certainly there was a delay in the second plane, the plane that I was traveling in, because people were struggling to get to the airport. And while we were there was a massive explosion just to the south of the airport, because we were being told by one of the pilots we had overstayed the amount of time we'd been given to actually be at the airport, and we needed to hurry up because the calm was almost a pretense. One started to get a feeling that the bombing was just stopped for the period that we were there.
And what about the people you were on board with? What did they tell you? Who were they? Where were they from?
Well, most people said the same thing, and that is that the situation is really horrible. I spoke to someone who works for the United Nations, and she said that within 6 months the country is going to have run out of food. People spoke to me about not having water resources, not having access to bread, that groceries, for example, were no longer stocking up on bread supplies. A few people also mentioned the problem with fuel, that soldiers were using fuel, and so that they were unable to get around and move outside of their houses. I spoke to an Italian citizen who had been trapped in his hotel for 2 weeks, and only today had he managed to get to the airport and onto the Russian plane. There were nationals on these two planes from Egypt, Russia, Syria, Moldova, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. I managed to speak to one American national who said that he had felt completely betrayed by the American government, that American nationals were trapped inside the country, and that they had been given the message that America would be sending no government planes to take them out. And as he said to me, it was ironical that he was now being evacuated on a Russian plane. There was one flight, however, that did actually arrive in Sana while we were there. I found that quite surprising, and when I spoke to someone on the flight, he said, well, in the same way that the foreigners are fleeing because they're afraid and want to be with their family, Yemenites who are outside the country are also afraid and also want to be with their families, and some of them are trying to make their way back into the country.
Wow. A truly awful situation, Paula. Thank you so much indeed for updating us. Hopefully we'll speak to you a bit later on as well throughout the evening on the programme.